Welcome to Silberman Law Firm's Weekly Docket, episode 49, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is December 19th, 2024. And I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host. And I'm joined by Austin Black, my co-host, who's joining us still from Japan, but soon to be on his way back.
Correct.
And Austin, I understand you just came from a concert in Japan, is that right?
That's right. So our Airbnb is in Shinjuku City, and I came from a concert in Shibuya right now. Yeah.
Okay. And what did you see? What kind of concert was it?
I saw a band called Covet. They are math rock, which a lot of people don't know what that means, but it's mostly instrumental stuff, and they have weird time signatures in their music. It's the main artist is a girl who's just amazing at guitar. It is cool to see her. So.
Okay, yeah. Next time I ask the question, just say Taylor Swift or something for the listeners, okay?
I went to go see Taylor Swift at a dive bar in Shibuya. Yes, correct.
Cool. All right, we got that covered.
Yeah.
All right, what's on our docket today, Mr. Black?
So first, we have our legal news section, and that's comprised this week of a singular topic, which is the Supreme Court taking up the TikTok ban. Very interesting. We'll be going over the current legal landscape of that ban, what it's based on, and our predictions on how we think the court's going to rule, which I'm sure you all are waiting with bated breath for. And then moving on to our legal question section. First, we'll be answering the question of whether it is illegal to have other people sign for you. Okay, that's a question we've gotten. And then second, if you own a coffee shop or a gym or a hair salon, something like that, right? Most people are aware that if someone opens up a second coffee shop, gym, or hair salon right next to you, it's probably going to make the value of your business and that location go down because there's competition, right? So if you want to make sure when you sign a commercial lease that situation is not going to happen, you're not going to have that competition come in, how can you avoid that? We'll let you know the answer to it. And then our rant and rave section, we're talking about another Supreme Court situation, specifically Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson and her appearance in a Broadway performance, which I believe is the very first time a Supreme Court Justice has appeared on Broadway. Though I do think that Chief Justice Roberts is auditioning for the next run of Grease. So we'll see how that goes.
It was a queer Broadway show. It was a queer spinoff of Romeo and Juliet. And queer is not our term. That's actually the Broadway marketing term. So I wanted to know.
So it was an odd spinoff. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I want people to know when we say queer, we're not being derogatory. That's just what it is.
Oh, no. Just to be clear, Phil, queer at the moment is not really ever used in a derogatory manner by the left or really the right. The right doesn't really use it. The left is, and they don't even know what it means. We'll talk about that when we get to there. So,
all right, sounds good. Let's kick it off with our legal news. And the first thing we're talking about is the Supreme Court is taking up the TikTok ban. Now, we covered this in a previous show back in April, probably when the story first broke, so to speak. Congress passed a law giving TikTok 9 months to sell. And that's because it's owned by ByteDance. And ByteDance is a company based in China. And we don't like the Chinese, not the people, the country. So
the government.
It's
the government.
The government.
Let's say that.
The government.
I think the country of China is very pretty. Okay, go on.
Okay. The issue is it's a national security risk. Okay. And it's really not even debatable that it's a national security risk anymore, because the Chinese government has vowed to block the sale of the logarithm, which tailors the content to specific users. So the Chinese government's position on this is if TikTok does get sold, spun off from ByteDance, then the logarithm is not going with it because the logarithm is that valuable to the Chinese government. And what that logarithm does is it targets specific users, United States citizens users, and it feeds them specific content. So it's basically like a propaganda machine. So if the Chinese government in a war wants to use it to opinion on the war or influence elections, which it has probably already done, by the way, it wants that logarithm. So this is definitely a national security risk. And this issue is really a national security issue versus a free speech issue, right? Austin, do you know what just generally what the TikTok position is on this, or TikTok lawyers are arguing? Are you familiar with their argument? Essentially, it's not that complex, but
weren't they arguing that like just by TikTok not existing, that it's violating the free speech rights of TikTok as an entity, as a business, as a person?
That's right. That's right. And corporations do have some free speech rights.
No, corporations are people.
Okay, Austin's being facetious.
No. I am holding the line that the Supreme Court currently has related to corporations. So go on.
We're not going to take a deep dive on corporate free speech. We did that in the previous show, and it's a little bit dry. But corporations do have some rights to free speech. It's not quite like an individual. Yeah. The real argument that TikTok's making, I think their best argument, is it's violating the free speech of all of the American users, right? So all of us that want to use TikTok, all the creators.
Yeah, that's your only avenue at expressing yourself in short form content.
Well, and the appellate court, this was already shot down. The TikTok's argument was already shot down by an appellate court. Appellate court said, no, TikTok, your argument is absurd. The American people can find an alternative platform to express their free speech on. Now, interestingly, Trump was all about the TikTok ban, right? And then recently he's reversed course on that. And he was recently quoted as saying, "Oh, there's a warm spot in my heart for TikTok because we won the youth vote and TikTok helped us do that." So I think it's so.
Did Trump actually win the youth vote?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think he did. So. Like I know young men voted for him like disproportionately, but I didn't think overall that he won the youth vote. Maybe.
No, I haven't officially checked that, but I don't think that's right. I do not think he won the youth vote, and I don't love the argument. If TikTok is a national security risk, it's now okay because it helps me win the election. I don't love that argument either.
I love that argument. It's great. If it helps you, I don't care how many national security risks it grants. That's great. I love it.
All right. The Supreme Court is going to take this up on January 10th. We're going to have to see how it comes out. A lot of people are asking me and other lawyers, like, if the Supreme Court was like the ruling, the appellate court, why didn't they just leave the appellate court ruling in place? And the answer to that is the Supreme Court is a conservative court now. It may want to set precedent on this issue for future generations. So I think the Supreme Court is going to side with the appellate court. They're going to keep the ban, and that's just fine with me.
And just for our listeners who may know, may not, why it's important for the Supreme Court sometimes to do this, even if it's an issue where they agree with the appellate court, is because if they just deny certiorari, where they're not going to review it, then the appellate court's ruling stands. That's correct, but it's only going to stand for that appeals court, right? And if there are other courts, other appeals courts at the same level that disagree with them, then it can lead to a circuit split. So if they think that even if that circuit split hasn't happened right now, where two appeals courts are disagreeing with each other, if they think that could happen in the future, they're going to go ahead and hear it to avoid that, to go ahead and set precedent. So
that is an excellent point. And I was watching a legal commentator, I think from Bloomberg, on this yesterday or somewhere, and he totally screwed that up and did not near give the explanation you did. So you have a future as a Bloomberg or MSNBC, maybe even a Fox News legal commentator.
I mean, I've always heard that Bloomberg is where attorneys go when they fail at the Silverman law firm. So,
yeah, I'm fine with that. Okay, let's go on and get into our next section. And this is our legal question section. Okay. And the first thing we're answering is it legal to have other people sign for you? Now, Austin, you mentioned, okay, like a statutory durable, that was your initial thought. Yeah, like a durable power of attorney. So explain what that is, the durable power of attorney.
Durable power of attorney, you designate an agent to sign things on your behalf. The normal form for that has a list of a certain amount of powers that you can designate the person who you're giving your power of attorney to have, to be able to sign, do things for you on your behalf. You don't have to check all of them. You can just check some. Frequently, people just check all. But that would basically give someone the authority to sell a property for you, sign a contract for you if they need to, things like that. It's usually done when you're not physically able to go do that.
Yeah, it's a legal document. You're following a law outlined in a code to officially appoint someone as the authority to sign on your behalf. You'll often recognize the signature will say something like Bill Smith as attorney in fact for Ted Jones. Yeah. That's just attorney in fact is just a fancy word for saying I'm the agent in this relationship. But this is a different question. This is really what people want to know. This is more like if you physically can't be somewhere. Like Austin, you're in Japan, and let's say you needed to sign a lease contract and you've got some documents that need to be wet signed. We say wet signing by ink and pen. So you call up.
It doesn't mean that you're like licking the envelope like we used to. Yeah.
You know, where I was so cheap at one point, I refused to buy the self-sealing envelopes and I would make them like lick them or use and our admin assistants complained, and it was like almost like a riot. They were like, I was like, no, we're saving like 26 cents an envelope. I want just get the sponge. I'm not going to make you lick it. Just get the sponge. Okay.
Phil, so, I actually think we should go back to that. Maybe some of our admin assistants' tongues would be a bit too tired to talk back when we ask them to do things.
Thankfully, I don't think any of our administrative staff are listeners to the show. If you are, we appreciate you very much. And I want everyone to know that I have bought the self-sealing envelopes.
Very good.
And we are not making our employees lick the envelopes or use the sponge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is if you need to call Betty, who's Austin's girlfriend in the States, and Austin's, hey, Betty, sign the lease for me. And Betty says, is that legal? Can I just sign? And Austin says, yes, I'm giving you permission.
Yes.
All right. So that it is legal. It's completely legal as long as you have permission. If you don't have permission, then that's a problem. That's like fraud and forgery. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The best way to do this, the best way to do this is indicate on whatever document you're signing, like the lease contract, you put like PP, like P period next to the signature, and you let everybody know that you're signing it with permission. This is called procuration, not procreation. That's something different. Okay. Procuration. And you're signing by proxy, right? So
if you can only sign via procreation, then that would be a very arduous process. So
the process, I don't know what goes on in your house, Austin. The process is
if you're signing a lot of documents, that could be hard.
Oh boy, we're gonna leave that pun alone. Okay. All right. And PP, I had to look this up because I didn't know. There's so many phrases in Latin that we use as lawyers. It stands for procurationem, I think. I'm not even pronouncing that right. Latin.
Per procurationem, right?
Yes.
Is it pro or is it per?
Per.
Per. Okay, got it.
Yeah, which is Latin for just means by proxy. Got it. All right. That's how you do that, people. All right.
We all took Latin in college. Yeah, all of us.
Yeah, no. We knocked that one out of the park. All right. Next legal question. Okay. All right. This is the coffee shop one. I saw this on the news. It was actually a local Houston story. Okay. This really nice Filipino man, young Filipino guy, comes to the country. He starts this coffee shop. I can't remember what the name of it is.
I love Filipino guys. They're awesome.
Yeah. And he leases in a relatively nice retail center. And he probably doesn't have an attorney, signs the lease. He's got this great coffee shop. People love it. He's got these nice drinks and all that kind of stuff. And then like Starbucks moves in right, not like in the same shopping center, but like right next to him in the same. So it's even worse, like right next to him in the same shopping center. Right. Yeah. And this landlord what a jerk this landlord is. But anyway, so the Starbucks, you know how Starbucks have these lines, people love paying $6-7 a cup for coffee.
Yes.
And people line up in their cars on the Starbucks drive-through, and the lines can get super long. Yeah. Okay. So he has this idea. He goes, you know what a bandit sign is, Austin?
I don't actually.
Okay. So a bandit sign is you ever see those little signs on the side of the road and they stick them in and they advertise something? Usually it's like work from home, make $100,000 a year. Or we buy houses. Those are called bandit signs because they're illegal in most places in Texas.
Okay.
So anyway, he puts his bandit signs out there, average, and it's a great idea because the people are like see the line in Starbucks, and and it ends up working to his benefit, and they see his like amazing coffee creation, and they stop waiting in the line in Starbucks and just drive over and get his coffee. So the Starbucks, I think the Starbucks like regional manager gets on the manager of that store or district manager, and the district manager now has to like starts pulling the signs out of the lawn, the little median place where he's putting them. And the landlord says, "Hey, I don't have a dog in this fight. As long as you guys both keep paying rent, I'm good." That's a common that's a common space. So you guys put signs in there as much as you want, or take them out for that matter. No. So
the landlord is just like, let them fight.
Yes. What's unfortunate about this, right, is if the Filipino man, really nice Filipino immigrant, got a lawyer, we just would have put a non-compete clause in or an exclusivity clause in the lease. And all that does is it says you can't lease to another shop that sells coffee. Okay. That's all that is. Yep. And it's a pretty simple thing, and it's a pretty common clause. If you have a retail center in places like Texas, it's still a really good business. Office is dead in the water. Yeah. But if you have a nice retail center, you'll see like a dentist. You got to have your dentist, your nail salon, your dry cleaners. It's a good business. Yeah. Okay. So if you're going to do one of those leases, you want to have an exclusivity clause where you can't put another dry cleaners in there. You can't put another coffee shop in there. I like to get really specific on those clauses and spell out some damages stuff. If the landlord tries to do this, we can enjoin the landlord from doing it. Some liquidated damages stuff and how much money and what happens and all that. Got to be careful with that because contract damages cannot be punitive, but definitely need an exclusivity clause in there. That's how we handle it.
Pretty unsophisticated landlord that agrees to that, but we would see. So,
well, he's at least got it. If you've got a strip center and you've got like 10 tenants, the other thing is like a daycare. You've got a daycare, a nail salon, a dentist, and when a lot of people don't know this, you actually advertise. You start advertising. You look at it as you're building sort of community, and you want the right price. So you'll see retail spaces, landlords specifically say, we're looking for a flower shop, right? And flower shops do very well with that. And that's how you do it, okay? But be sure, people, if you're a small business owner, get an exclusivity clause in that lease or call a good
If you are opening up a flower shop and you want to make sure that you're going to stay there for a long time and not be pushing daisies, okay, make sure that you get an exclusivity clause.
When it gets to be too late in Japan, the dad jokes come out. That's
so you can continue pushing daisies to your customers. Exactly.
That's exactly right. All right. This brings us to our favorite section of the show, favorite part of the show. This is our rant and rave section, right? And this is Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. All right. She appeared in a queer Broadway spinoff of Romeo and Juliet.
Okay, just briefly before we get really deep into this, Phil, can you define for me what queer means?
Oh my goodness. See, Austin's trying to set me up for getting in trouble.
I'm actually not. I promise you I'm not. I'm just curious what you would define it as. Can you define it?
Okay, so as someone who's basically, I guess technically I'm either the oldest millennial or youngest Gen X, depending upon where you look at how that's defined. For someone, when I was growing up in Texas, queer really was a derogatory.
It was.
And that there was an idea he's a queer and all that. But now it's really, I believe it is embraced by the LGBTQ plus community as an appropriate term. And they're using it here to say this isn't the traditional Romeo and Juliet. My daughter is a big theater person. And she just finished a production. What was it? I went to see it. Oh, it was a production of Beauty and the Beast.
Okay.
And it wasn't the traditional Beauty and the Beast. It was like a camping themed Beauty and the Beast.
That's
right?
Cool. Wait, who did she play?
She played one of the girls. She did not have a big role in that one. It was one of the girls in what they sing. They're fawning over Gaston, right?
Yes, one of the barmaids.
Yes, but a barmaid. They call him something else. Yeah. Now, She did. They're also doing a spinoff of Peter Pan.
Okay.
So this is a very common. No one wants to just go see the traditional Romeo and Juliet anymore.
Sure.
They want to go I guess they want to see these spinoffs. I don't know why. But so now they're doing a spinoff of Peter Pan, not the traditional Peter Pan. And she's got like Hook. She is Hook. So that's a bigger role. But anyway, so this is a spinoff, queer Romeo and Juliet. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, obviously very liberal appointed by Joe Biden. Okay. Now the rant here, Austin, is not necessarily, I don't care where you fall on the political spectrum and what your opinions about LGBTQ plus are. We're not talking about that for this show. All right. Next show. This is really whether the Supreme Court justice ought to be doing things like appearing in Broadway shows. What do you think? Is that something we want our justices doing?
So, in an ideal world, I have a lot of opinions about this. In an ideal world, no. But it is my opinion that the Supreme Court is so far removed from any involved and invested observer of the Supreme Court. I'm not talking about people who just like notice when someone gets appointed or something. People who follow closely along with most decisions, not just the ones that get big media attention, but most decisions. I think we're so far removed from the justices being these like bastions of neutrality and just the law is the law that honestly, I don't care. I think that we're just so far outside of it. In an ideal world, yes, I don't think they should be doing things like this.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And the critics are arguing that her involvement could compromise her impartiality.
It's already been compromised a long time.
They're way beyond that. It just is what it is. Supreme Court justices are people too. I personally think it is way beneath the dignity of the court. I'm coming at this from like an old school standpoint. I need to point out, to be fair to my liberal friends out there, we need to talk about, is this the same or similar to Justice Samuel Alito, who conservative appointee by George H.W. Bush, okay? He was flying outside his New Jersey beach house, lives in Virginia, and he's got a beach house in New Jersey, and down American flag and an appeal to heaven flag were flown outside of his residence at some point. Those flags were carried by the rioters on January 6th. Is that the same, Austin, as what's going on here with her appearing on Broadway?
I think it's the same. I think it goes to the same point that we're so far removed from it that it really doesn't matter at this point. But unless the court decides that they want to make a concerted effort to move back towards the traditional way they were perceived, which I don't think they ever will. But unless the court collectively makes that decision, I don't think we're ever getting back.
And here's another little side note on this story. Justice Samuel Alito, he put the flag up, and then some U.S. District Judge Michael Ponzer of Massachusetts, he writes an essay for the New York Times criticizing him putting the flag up. And then this Ponzer guy ends up getting reprimanded for writing the essay for violating judicial ethical rules.
Yes.
Okay. So little side note on that. I think this is very similar. You fly flags in front of your house, you appear in a queer Romeo and Juliet, or if she had Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson had flown a rainbow flag out of her house, I guess it'd be exactly analogous, right? So she didn't do that, but she...
It is insane to me that the district judge was reprimanded for that, for violating judicial ethical rules. First off, a lot of judicial ethical rules are pretty amorphous and just are enforced politically, honestly, which is what we're seeing here. Yeah. And it's just really crazy that they say that, because we have here in our show notes that the Judicial Council, when they were determining whether they're going to reprimand this district judge, determined that publicly criticizing a U.S. Supreme Court justice diminished the public's confidence. Look, public, okay, the small amount of public who listen to this podcast, okay, public, if your confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court has not been diminished to the extent that it can be at this point, I think you have not been watching the Supreme Court enough. So.
All right. And the public, Austin, lawyers, we have a lot of lawyer listeners. Lawyers are part of the public. Okay.
Yes.
We have a lot of business people as well. They're
Sure.
part of the public.
Sure.
And we have a lot of regular listeners too. But I'm just telling you, that's my plug for lawyers are people too. Okay.
Lawyers are people too. True. That goes to lawyers too. That goes to lawyers too. If you still have confidence in the Supreme Court, you're a better person than me.
So Justice Brown Jackson, she was the first, big surprise, she was the first U.S. Supreme Court justice to appear on Broadway. And there was I found this information. Interestingly, in 1994, Justices Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg appeared in a Washington National Opera together.
Yes.
And you may not know this, Austin, but Scalia and Ginsburg were actually great friends. Obviously, you didn't know that, Austin. Yeah. I can't surprise Austin. But for our listeners out there, Scalia, very conservative justice. Ginsburg, obviously, a very liberal justice. They had a wonderful personal relationship, great friends on opposite sides of the aisle. They appeared in a national opera, Washington National Opera. They did not have speaking roles. Okay. They were just appeared. They both loved the opera. I don't think it was a queer Romeo and Juliet like show. All right. That brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silverman. Austin Black has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. Reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com. That's info@silblawfirm.com. And tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. We will do our best. Everybody have a Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah.